a gigabyte of storage, well, CD-ROM.
Dang, a whole gigabyte. That's crazy.
Angelnaut.
Salutations to the nations. What's good? Angelnaut, is your boy Young Sinai. So I am going live while my kids are taking a nap. So this is a YouTube channel that I watch all the time, and he talks about business. His name is Michael Girdley. I watch it all the time, but I didn't know his name nor the name of his channel. Forgive me. But he talks about businesses and things that you can learn from businesses that went out of business and the mistakes that they made. And he's been doing he's done a few videos recently discussing video game companies, and this one in particular is talking about Sega. Please make sure you go check him out and tell him that I sent you. You know what I'm saying? He'd be like, who the heck is that? But his channel is Michael Girdley, Girdley, and this video is titled The Rise, Fall and Comeback of Sega, from 65% market share to 1.2 billion in losses. All right, so let's go ahead and check this out.
1995, a guy named Todd Kalinske walked up on a stage at a conference called E3, and he destroyed his whole company. He just didn't know he'd done it yet. Todd was the CEO of Sega of America, and at that moment, he was basically a hero. He had taken Sega from basically nothing to having beaten Nintendo at its own game for 4 holiday seasons in a row to 65% market share. That morning at the conference, he was supposed to be announcing their new console, the Saturn, but his bosses back in Japan had made him make some decisions that would later prove catastrophic. It turns out he knew it. The biggest of those decisions was that they were rushing the console out to market. It would be 5 months until it was really ready, but his bosses back in Japan, they wanted it out right now. This one bad decision would put Sega into a death spiral, a decision that would cause them to eventually, a few years later, lose out not only to Nintendo, but $400 million in a single year alone. But here's the crazy twist. Even after all of this and abandoning the console business, Sega is now a pretty profitable company. Sonic the Hedgehog movies have done over $1 billion at the box office, and they're releasing hit games. So how did Sega go from conquering?
Man, I love the Sonic movies. I've seen all 3, but the second one I have to put an asterisk because I keep falling asleep. It's not that it's a bad movie. I promise it's not. I just keep falling asleep on that mode for some reason. When it gets towards the end, I keep falling asleep. But the first one and the third one were good. I do look forward to seeing Amy on the next.
Nintendo to near collapse to becoming a hit again. This is the rise, fall, and redemption of Sega. And thanks to Subscribe for sponsoring this video. More on them later. The story of Sega actually starts with an American Air Force officer named David Rosen, who was stationed in Japan during the Korean War. And Rosen decided after the end of the war to stay in Japan and live there. And he saw something happen, and the economy was booming, and people had disposable incomes. So he started a business importing American amusement machines. Despite 200% import duties, the bet paid off. People love those machines. And in
Sorry, I was making sure that my audio was not doubling.
1965, he merged his business with a local Japanese company, creating Sega. By the late 1970s, the company was pulling in over $100 million a year from arcade games. And then the console revolution started. Sega released the SG-1000 back in 1983. And in 1985, they released the Master System. But it turned out they were losing. Nintendo owned over 90% of market share by 1988. The gap was stunning. Nintendo had sold over 60 million consoles. Sega, just 13 million, and only 2 million of those were in the United States. They were getting crushed. See, Nintendo had been pretty...
When you were a kid, did you have a SegaGenesis, or did you have a Super Nintendo, or were your parents rich and you had both? I had both, but not because my parents were rich, but because my parents were divorced. So that's a good thing that came from the divorce. You know what I'm saying? I'll go to my mom's and play SegaGenesis, and back at my dad's, I'll play the Super Nintendo.
Mark, what makes consoles really valuable is other people building consoles for your platform. And Nintendo had required people to only build games for their console, effectively locking them out from putting games on Sega. Because Sega was the perpetual underdog, they had to do something audacious. So in 1988, Sega decided to win based on technology. They released something called the Mega Drive in Japan. In the US, it would be called the Genesis.
The most advanced video game system in the universe.
Yes!
Mega Drive from Sega.
Available at retail stores. Headphones optional. Yo, that's cold that you could plug up headphones to the Genesis. I don't think I realized that. That's pretty sick.
And it made a huge leap in terms of technology. Whereas Nintendo's was an 8-bit system, suddenly the Genesis was 16 bits, meaning more colors and more power.
With thousands of colors, 16-bit graphic technology, and 10-channel mega stereo sound.
But here's something you'll learn. Better technology doesn't often win. There's lots of better operating systems than Windows. There's lots of violence than the iPhone. And that just didn't work. Sega tried everything. First thing they tried was a branding campaign called Nintendo. You get it? Very punny. Didn't work. Sega still just had 8% market share. Then Japan's president, a man named Hayao Nakayama, he hired our protagonist, a man named Tom Kalinske. He was a legend in the toy industry. At Mattel, he'd revived Barbie. He made Hot Wheels a thing. He was a guy who knew how to sell stuff to kids. Kalinske spent a month analyzing the situation. Then he hopped a plane to Japan to pitch them on his plant. The first thing he wanted to do was slash the prices. He reduced the console from $189 to $149. The second thing he did was produce games specifically for American taste, especially sports games. Third, he wanted to go nuclear on advertising. He wanted to increase Sega's advertising budget from $10 million a year to $60 million a year. The last thing, and perhaps the most important, is he wanted to replace their bundled game, which had been called Altered Beast. A game so ignominious, I've never even heard of it until I researched this video.
Man, what? You ain't heard of Altered Beast, man? You bugging, bud. Man, what? I'm not a huge Altered Beast fan, but I heard of it. You know what I'm saying? What?
And the new game would be called Sonic the Hedgehog. In Japan, they hated the plan. They practically, in the boardroom, begged that they would fire this new American. But Nakayama overruled them. He basically went to the board and said, I don't care what you think. I'm going to allow this new American we hired and trusted to go make some moves.
Good, because you know how crazy that would be, like, if they would have fired him and not, had Sonic come packaged with. It had to. You feel me? It's like competing with the Super Nintendo was coming packaged with Super Mario. What? Like, corporations are so dumb. Like, they do not know what the people want.
And so Tom did. This dynamic of the American CEO versus the Japanese board, well, it would prove to be kind of important later on in the story. And so the plan got put into action. Sonic the Hedgehog was launched in June 1991. It would prove to be a game that would change the entire console industry.
Now, get Sonic free when you buy a SegaGenesis system at its new price of $149.99.
The game was faster, brighter colors, and more tied to culture than anything else.
$149.99. I want to see what that is adjusted for inflation. What was $149 in 1989 adjusted for inflation today? Dang! That's still kind of expensive. It said that's about $400 today. That's about $400. Wow. I mean, it's like the modern consoles, so it's not really outrageous like I'm feeling. I just didn't think that it was going to be that, Wow.
That was on the market. Mario,
but I mean, back when calculators first came out, those things were heck expensive too. So what can I expect?
It was cool for Nintendo, but he didn't really reflect anything going on in the culture. In fact, the guys at Sega were so in tune with stuff that they tried to make Sonic's shoes be reminiscent of Michael Jackson at the time. He was a can-do kind of guy, moving fast, breaking stuff. All these moves.
And side note about Michael Jackson actually made the music for, I believe, the third game. And rumor has it that he didn't want his name put on it because the audio quality didn't meet his standards. But yeah, Michael Jackson is a huge video game fan.
Paid off during the 1991 holiday season on the back of Sonic the Little Hedgehog. The Sega console outsold Nintendo by 2-1. By January 1992, Sega had 65% of the console market. Basically, they'd been getting trounced by Nintendo before, and it was the first time Nintendo hadn't been in the lead for almost 7 years. And all that advertising spend had totally worked. Sega kept up the pressure. They were on MTV. They were basically on rock concerts. Everything that could target a teenager who had access to disposable income from their parents, well, Sega was out trying to reach them. They were so edgy targeting teenagers that eventually it led to congressional hearings on video games.
To advertise that it includes deadly new weapons, 6 levels of monster bashing mayhem, and killer special moves.
Remember, this is...
Oh my gosh. Society was so innocent back then. They did not know what was to come with games. With Grand Theft Auto, Resident Evil. Oh my gosh, what else could I think of? Shoot, any game. And so they're concerned about the language with that. Oh my gosh, it's so innocent and naive. People of the past, wait till you see what's to come.
Back in the era with parental lyric labels and stuff like that on CDs, yeah, it was a bit of a different time. The Sega guys, they pushed it. In 1993, a game came out called Mortal Kombat.
Whoa, he said, wait, I wanted to hear that again. Hold on.
The Sega guys labels and stuff like
Special moves.
Remember, this is back in the era with parental lyric labels and stuff like that on CDs. Yeah, it was a bit of a different time.
Do they not put parental advisory stickers on CDs anymore? Do they still put parental advisory stickers on CDs? Okay. Okay. It says yes, record labels and artists still use the warning label on physical releases. However, the label is completely voluntary and today is often printed directly as part of the album cover art rather than applied as a physical peel-off sticker. I don't know if I've ever known it to be a peel-off sticker. Okay.
The Sega guys, they pushed it. In 1993, a game came out called Mortal Kombat. Nintendo, by default, basically censored all the blood, gore, and guts. It's a pretty crazy game. Sega basically allowed you to unlock all that stuff with a secret code. They just didn't care about catering to little kids. They were going to push the envelope.
Finish him!
They said they about that bottom line. That's all they care about.
By 1993, just 3 years
Raiden done got the video demonetized from a fatality. Man, tripping.
in, Sega had over half the console market, which is pretty crazy considering Nintendo just a few years before, at the start of the decade, had over 90%. Under Kalinske, the revenue of the company grew from $72 million a year to $1.5 billion a year. Market cap from $2 billion to $5 billion. And right at the moment, it looked like they couldn't do any wrong. Well, that's when things started to change for Sega. Despite being at the top of their triumph, Sega had been quietly planting the seeds of their own destruction. See, the way console makers have to work is they release one big console at a time, getting all their video game publishers around them to release at the same time and work on the new platform. But Sega hadn't been doing that. They had been basically producing add-on after add-on for the Genesis, rather than focusing on big platform releases one at a time. In 1992, they created a $300 add-on for the Genesis. It was a
Did you have Sega CD? I didn't.
CD-ROM thing. Basically, it just created some crappy movies that were run on the Sega platform, and the publishers didn't sign up for it. It was just a mess. In 1994, they created a thing called the 32X. It was a flop. They basically just extended the life of the existing Genesis. They sold barely 800,000 units, drop in the bucket. And all this stuff meant if you were going to buy all these add-ons for the Genesis as a consumer, the entire platform to take full use of it will cost you over $1,200. It's a lot of money back then. Heck, when I was a kid in the 90s,
All right, I got to adjust for inflation again. Okay, it knew what I was saying. I lost. Oh my gosh. It said that's about $3,223 today for all those add-ons for the Sega Genesis. That is bananas.
you could still buy a pretty decent car for $1,200. I mean, it was a used beater, but it was still a used car. That was a lot of bucks for a teenager. In just 5 years, Sega asked consumers to support 5 different pieces of hardware.
Okay, let's see. What all did I have on this? I had the Sega Genesis. right? I had a Sega Saturn a little bit later in life. I did not have the other things. I didn't have a Game Gear. I had a Sega Nomad. He didn't put the Sega Nomad on here. But yeah.
Actually, many of them just gave up. Internally, the drama that I talked about between the American CEO and the Japanese board, it was starting to percolate. And if you've been a fan of this channel, you probably saw my video on Nissan. Same exact thing happened to them. And the board and Tom kept drifting apart. Tom would later talk about that being a product of his success. There was jealousy at headquarters that this overseas stuff was outshadowing everything going on back in Japan. The hubris was pretty amazing. In 1996, the internal strategy team at Sega basically drafted a big vision document that at the time saw them toppling industry giant Sony. But within a couple years, they would be actually exiting the console business entirely. And part of that downfall was, meanwhile, their cross-country neighbor, Sony, the giant, was trying to enter the console business themselves. And here's the crazy thing. Sega actually helped Sony come in and eventually, kill them from the business. And how they did it? Well, Tom actually instructed his team to help the Sony engineers learn how to make their own console. The reason was there had been talks at that point about Sony and Sega working together to create a super console between the...
Hey, did anybody ever have that PlayStation? That was the one on the right. That was the PS1. I mean, like, that's what it was called. I know it was a PlayStation 1, but that was actually called PS1.
Two of them. And that could have happened. But it turns out the Sega leadership didn't believe that Sony was serious about entering the console business. But it turned out they were really serious. And on top of that, famous at the time graphics company called Silicon Graphics had offered Sega their new 64-bit technology, which would push things even further for their next console. Well, they said no to it at Sega. Nintendo would use that for their Nintendo 64 to come out later. Sega was so set on milking their existing customer base that they were forgetting that they had to keep building and staying aggressive and paranoid to win in the future. This would all come back to haunt them. Have you ever started writing a quick how-to? May of 1995, when Tom got on stage, Sega had originally planned to release the Saturn on September 2nd, 1995, a Saturday. They were going to call it Saturn Day. Get it? Very punny.
Hey,
but
that's
Sega
hard.
was getting freaked out. And the thing they were getting freaked out about was they had learned that Sony was about to release the PlayStation. So management back in Japan pushed Tom to go up on stage and announce the thing immediately. Kalinske wanted to actually put it off almost a whole nother year to be released. And ultimately, he got so pissed about being forced to release something that wasn't ready, he'd eventually leave Sega. Tom announced that that very day, retailers like Toys R Us, which was still a thing back then, would be selling...
Man, I miss Toys R Us. Yo, I be trying to tell my kids, yo, y'all don't even know how cold my childhood was. Y'all don't got Toys R Us. Y'all don't got KB Toys. Y'all don't got FAO Schwartz, man. Y'all's childhood sucks.
the new Saturn for $399, available that day. But here's the thing. Retailers, including Toys R Us and all the other folks, EV Games, Babbage's, if you're around for those guys, they were all like...
Yes, I drink my water with a straw because I am bougie.
Not informed that they were starting to carry these things. Customers showed up asking where the new Saturn was, and these guys were pissed. Many of them would refuse to even carry the new console from Sega because of this move. Third-party game developers were blindsided too. Because they'd rushed it too early, that meant that only 6 games were available at launch. And then after Tom, the head of PlayStation, a guy named Steve Race, came on board.
Let me know what's your favorite Sega Saturn game.
And he just basically said one word.
Oh, this was gangster right here. This is gangster. If you ain't never seen this, this is one of the most gangster moments in video game history.
A guy named Steve Race came on board. And he just basically said one word.
$299.
$299. Well, that's more than one word, but you see what I'm saying in telling everybody about the PlayStation. The room erupted. Sony was going to be undercutting Sega by over $100. Within 2 days of the PlayStation's launch, it had outsold the entirety of the Saturn's 5-month head start.
Wow.
Saturn would never recover. Within the first year, the PlayStation would jump to over 20% market share against, well, pretty long-standing competition. Worse, there was no flagship game for the Saturn. There was no Sonic the Hedgehog game. They'd been trying to make a 3D version of it, and that was mired by technical problems. By 1996, they'd canceled the game entirely, never releasing it. Nintendo had Mario, Sega had Sonic, and they launched a console without a Sonic game.
That's
Incredible.
insane.
By 1996, Kalinske had had enough of the internal
Well, shoot, Switch just launched without a Mario game, kinda, not really, because they had Mario Kart. Are we counting Mario Kart as a Mario game since it's not a platformer? I don't know. Let me know.
Politics and jealousy and all that kind of stuff, and he resigned as CEO of the company. And here's the deal. When you are an owner or a CEO of the business and you have a great person on your team, your job number one needs to be making sure they don't go anywhere. And there's a combination of ways to do that. But first and foremost, you got to make sure their job is pleasant and they feel like they could be successful. Tom had neither of those things. Tom's replacement, a guy named Bernie Stolar, went on the stage at E3 in 1997. And he announced basically the Saturn has no future, which basically, well, killed the whole platform again. In early 1998, they killed the Saturn entirely. To put it in perspective, it sold only 9.8 million units.
Oh my gosh.
The PlayStation had sold over 100 million. And remember Hayao Nakayama, the longtime Sega, chairman and president, who had backed Kalinske and those early gambles that had paid off? He ended up having to resign as well. From 1998 to 2002, Sega started bleeding out. They lost over $1.5 billion. But look, why not start from scratch? And their next move would be the Dreamcast.
Sega is rolling out a new video game console this week, hoping to win back a larger share of the market.
The graphics. Better graphics means it's more realistic.
Sega's new Dreamcast video game console is graphically.
The Dreamcast is probably the most underrated console of all time. I'm standing on that. It has so many good games, like cult classic games, Jet Set Radio, Crazy Taxi, etc. Unreal Tournament.
Better.
The Dreamcast was your classic effort that tried to do everything. And remember how before they had tried to win based on technology? Well,
that mug had, if I'm not mistaken, that mug had internet before like the Xbox and stuff came out. Am I tripping? I could be wrong on that.
Tried it this time. Dreamcast was the first console built for online play.
Okay, yep, I was right. Yeah, see?
It had an integrated portable unit that would move it around, a gigabyte of storage, well, CD-ROM.
Dang, a whole gigabyte. That's crazy.
And if it had a bell or a whistle, they added it. On 9/9/99, they launched the thing, and it would be the biggest launch of any console in history. They sold 225,000 units in 24 hours, garnering almost $100 million in revenue in one day. This time they hadn't screwed up everything. They made sure that there were good games to come out with it. They had NFL 2K, a new Sonic game, a bunch of other games as well. Right, the publishers at least, well, they hadn't made the mistakes that they did before with the Saturn. But then Sony made an announcement. And in 1999, they announced the PlayStation 2 with specs that would make it even more powerful.
And that mug had a DVD player. Sony had that DVD player. You know Sega can't compete with that. Why y'all do that, Sony? Why y'all doing that to them again? They was getting off on the right foot, then y'all come messing it up again.
The Dreamcast.
Sony PlayStation 2 will be the biggest thing to come along since TV was invented. The buzz on this product is...
My bad. I had to hit pause because I'm like, where is that music coming from? I didn't know if it was coming from the video I was reacting to or if something started playing on my computer. My bad.
That's strong.
PlayStation 2.
PlayStation 2, newest, fastest video game system ever.
And there's something about the economics of these console wars. The way it works is the razor and razor blade situation, kind of the way Gillette does it. Well, not for me recently, I have a beard. But basically they sell you the razor for cheap or even at a discount or even at a loss. And then they make money by selling you the blades. And this whole deal, like the consoles as well, is the same thing. For the longest time, including the PlayStation business, they would sell the consoles at a loss. The reason they could do that is the deals they had with the publishers who wrote the games, well, they would get a cut of their revenue. So they make the big money on the games, lose money on the consoles. And Sony's genius move was to realize you could push this way of doing stuff really far. And at the time, in around the year 2000, it was expensive to buy a DVD player. It wasn't like today, where those things are basically obsolete. Basically, a PlayStation 2 was...
Dag, I just thought about something. And this might not be like revolutionary, but I just thought about the vertical integration with Sony, right? So vertical integration, to my understanding, is when you own basically the whole supply chain, right? So with the Sony PlayStation 1, Sony is a label, right? So it's not only beneficial for them to sell the consumer, it's not only beneficial on our end, like, oh man, I can play my CDs, but they're like, no, not only can you play video games, but you can play CDs, which we own the label, right? We own the label for a lot of these artists. So you're going to buy the CDs to put in the PlayStation. But then it's even deeper, because when the PlayStation 2 comes out and now they're selling movies, I mean, Sony owns the film business too. It makes movies. So the vertical integration, they're getting money on all levels. Like, it's crazy. I never thought about that until just now.
It's going to sell for cheaper than a DVD player was. And the reason was because Sony was subsidizing at a loss. They were big. They could afford to lose money temporarily. Basically, this announcement stunned the entire market. Because it was so cheap and going to be such a good deal, customers started to wait. And sales for the Dreamcast started to decline as early as the middle of the year 2000. Then there was another problem. Electronic Arts, the biggest publisher in the world for the Dreamcast, well, they had decided they weren't going to make games for the platform. Sega had made a mistake of getting into the game production business. They paid $10 million for their own game developer. It just turns out that game developer had been making games around sports, and EA wanted to be the only one making sports games for the Dreamcast. No Madden, no FIFA, no NHL. Those games,
wow,
they went to the PlayStation instead. Sega responded by cutting prices, and heck, they tried everything. They'd back up the truck and give you free subscriptions to their Dreamcast service, free games, cheap prices. Basically, nothing worked. And the reason was there wasn't good content to run on the platform. In September 2000, with things looking very bleak for the platform, executives of Sega in America, Tom Moore and Charles Belfield, they flew to Japan to meet with their Japanese counterparts in the console business. Their recommendation was kind of revolutionary. Sega should abandon making consoles at this point, leave that to the other guys, and focus on making games instead. The numbers made their case for them. The Dreamcast needed to sell.
Do y'all feel like what was your reaction when you saw Sonic on a Nintendo console for the first time? In my mind, I was like, oh, they lost. They lost. It was low key, like, kind of cringe.
5 million units that year to be viable. They were going to sell only 3 million. At the end of January 2001, Sega made it official. They would get out of the Dreamcast and the console business entirely and for good, and go on to just make games for other people's consoles. After 18 years in the business, the SG-1000, the Dreamcast, the Saturn, all the Saga, they were out, and the company would be forever different. The PlayStation 2 would sell 155 million units. The Dreamcast, only 9 million. And today, Sega might be dead, except for one thing. Sega's largest and wealthiest shareholder, a man named Isao Ogawa.
Hey, look at that right there. That picture of Michael Jackson. I just said earlier that Michael Jackson was a huge video gamer, right? And that he did music for Sonic. So right there, that's the proof. That's all I got.
And he basically personally loaned the company $500 million. And also he forgave a lot of that loan and took it back as stock. It's basically his entire personal fortune. That one man alone, Isao, is responsible for, well, basically keeping Sonic the Hedgehog alive.
Wow.
Otherwise, he wouldn't be around. And at this point, most people would have expected Sega to fade away. Another victim of the losing side of the console wars alongside, Coleco and a television and Commodore and on down the line. But that wasn't what was about to happen. Instead, our beloved Sonic the Hedgehog and other IP, he started to appear on other platforms. The Xbox, the PlayStation, heck, even Nintendo, their longtime rival. In 2004, they made a pretty smart move. They merged with a company called the Sammy Corporation, who made gambling machines called Pachinko machines, if you've ever seen one, back in Japan.
I thought that Sega got their start making like those types of machines. Am I tripping? Am I getting my Sega history wrong? I thought they started with that, but I guess this is saying that they just made it bigger, or maybe they had stopped for a while. I don't know. I got to catch up on my Sega history. It's been a little bit.
Japan. That provided steady revenue beyond just the game making. Sonic, the Yakuza series through their subunit Altus. Other ones, they kept the franchise and the business alive. In 2008, they did the unthinkable. They put Mario and Sonic together in one game on the Nintendo platform. In 2020...
So, funny fact about that, I actually have that game. Hold on, I'm going to go grab it. Okay. I conveniently had it very close by. So, fun fact about this game is Nintendo said that Mario's foot had to be ahead of Sonic's. Like he had to be winning the race, which is crazy petty. But yeah, I just had to. That's so funny to me. They're big corporations, but they're still so petty.
Took that IP and tried to make even more money from it. They released a movie about Sonic the Hedgehog. Basically where he would be in a movie.
I am so glad that they listened to the fans about redesigning Sonic. Could you imagine if they didn't and then they released the other characters? Like, I really wonder what they wouldn't have looked like if they wouldn't have stayed true to like how Sonic usually looks. Could you imagine like a crazy looking Tails and a crazy looking Knuckles and all of these and Shadow and all these characters, like dumb versions of them?
Pretty crazy. Problem was the trailer was so poorly received because of the CGI being so bad that they had to redo the entire movie. But it totally worked. The first film made $319.
But it low key worked in their favor, because them taking the time to redo that movie showed that they did care about what the fans thought, right? So it almost worked out even better. Like it's like Gary Vaynerchuk, who I don't really rock with too much nowadays, he said something a long time ago, which is it's almost better to make a mistake in business so that you can have the opportunity to tell your customer that you're sorry, and then go above and beyond making things better for them. And that's kind of what it was like in this situation. Had they not made that crazy looking Sonic, they would have never got to redeem themselves and show like, yo, we hear you guys. We respect what you're saying. We're going to go ahead and make this right.
$1 million. The second one, $400 million. And the third one, above that as well, wow. $424 million as of the time of this recording. Sonic is now the second highest grossing franchise from a video game of all time. Behind.
Still below Mario.
Only our buddy, Mario. Over $1 billion. So a little hedgehog. Crazy. In 2025, the enterprise content, in other words, the video game and licensing component of the Sammy Corporation, more than doubled its profits year over year. And today it's the most valuable part of the entire corporation. And what had been a pretty bad business, trying to fight it out in the console war against...
I just thought about something. Okay, no. Nintendo doesn't own Sonic, even though Sega still owns Sonic, because they're just licensing Sonic to Nintendo for games. I was going to say, is the Sonic movie technically a Nintendo film? But it's not. So I answered that question in my head. My bad.
Microsoft, Nintendo, and Sony has turned into an amazing business where they took that own IP and now they're printing money. Arguably in a better business to be in than the console one. The reality is, a lot of times the best way to find out a great business to be in is to start out in the wrong business. Activity basically allows you to learn things about the world that you didn't otherwise know. In this case, that's what Sega learned. After 5 iterations of their console, some wins and some losses, they learned, man, there's just better businesses to be in. And fortunately at this point, because everybody loves Sonic, they had a great opportunity to do it. All right, this is my second most requested video of the recent couple of months, the other one being Joanne Fabrics, which is...
All right, yo. So make sure that you go subscribe to his channel. Once again, it is Michael Gurley. He puts out really good videos, not just about video games, but all different types of brands, right? All right, well, I hear my kid waking up. So this has been great hanging out with you guys. Appreciate you and love y'all. Let me know if it's something you want me to talk about. Appreciate you. God bless and salutations to the nations. Peace.
Angelnaut.